This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording remotely and releasing new episodes every day. Today's guest is Makaya McCraven, a drummer, composer, and producer whose work illuminates the spiritual through line connecting generations of seemingly disparate avant-garde movements. Earlier this year, Makaya released We're New Again, a masterful reimagining of Gil Scott-Heron's final album, I'm New Here. Makaya spoke to me from his home in Chicago.
Hello?
Hello, Makaya.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. What have you been up to today?
Oh, what did I do today? Um, Parent.
How many kids do you have?
I got two kids. I got a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. So what do we do? I made some breakfast. Today was kind of lazy. It was a little lazier than the other days. I mean, I actually been exercising every day, um, cooking, made some food, hung out, played ball, cleaned off some deliveries, weird times.
Is the way that you're structuring your time during quarantine any different than how you would normally structure your days?
Well, yeah, I mean, one, usually, in our family, the summertime becomes like the time of insane travel. Because I'm on and off the road the whole time. They're free. We're visiting family in different regions around the country and world. We have pretty dispersed community, and they're meeting up with me on tour. And so, like, the last 3 summers have been, international travel with me, the kids, my wife. If I'm not on the road, I'm meeting them somewhere, and vice versa. So we've been pretty as a family, but my wife is pretty travels for work too, and is pretty busy with she's a university professor at Northwestern. We've got family all over, so we've been moving really fast for the last few years, and this has been actually really nice in a way, despite maybe some emotional ups and downs, and just worry in general. It's been really kind of a really great kick in my butt to slow down, focus inward, focus on my health, focus on my family, and take a little bit of time, kind of from like the fast-paced career and performance and everything. I've just been kind of chilling.
Did you?
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that from a lot of people, that it's kind of a relief.
I mean, I'm fortunate to be able to do that, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I'm not right now tripping about gigs. I already had April all off anyway, and I had a deadline on a recording project, which I'm pushing back now, and just taking this time to kind of just be more inward and kind of analyze the situation as it comes in terms of industry wise. Um, and just taking this as a, counting my blessings and feeling I'm very privileged to be in this position. I've been taking some remedial guitar lessons from a musician friend who was saying he was struggling and needed more students. Um, got lessons from my kids. From musicians I know that are in tougher position than I. Um, and just kind of doing that stuff. But I haven't really been working like directly on my creative projects or anything like that.
You're filling the well.
Yeah, you know, absolutely.
You know what's interesting is I think about how much of my self worth is tied to output and what I create and what I put out in the world, and how backwards that can be. I mean, I think to a certain extent it might be healthy, but it's really nice to remove that expectation of constantly making things.
I feel that for this moment for sure.
So you had recording sessions lined up?
No, I mean, I've done almost a like couple year or two's worth of recording um, towards a record that I'm working on, both in live and in studio contexts, with some shifting groups as well as strings and all these different things. And I have all these elements now here in my studio, which is also a blessing to have a studio ready to go to work at from home and a space and a lot of gear. Um, and so I have a lot of different takes and different elements to sift through, and that I, will use and I have been using to collage and create, what the final product would be. Um, and almost overwhelming amount of content there to kind of go through. But yeah, like I had a deadline in that, and I have a couple other projects on deck, kind of with a robust kind of release schedule that I'm supposed to uh, stay in, especially as like kind of larger and more entities are involved in the structure of these releases. So that was some mounting pressure for sure. And just like without much relent from the tour schedule that was building for the year. And it's been just kind of increasing in frequency and magnitude for the last 3 years or so, in very positive ways. But it's at times struggling to find the right balance in life, and to enjoy the ride and to find the pace. And so this has been kind of nice, and I'm starting to. It's been like 3 weeks now, and I'm looking forward to like you know maybe getting back to shedding my primary instrument being the drums, and getting back to working on the record, and doing things like this. I kind of took the time off from doing too many interviews. I mean, any of it didn't really feel for me in like the right spirit for the last little while. But yeah, no, I got a number of things coming this week, and probably not any sort of like online performance or content in that way. I don't know if that's my vibe, but yeah, it's good.
Why do you
You know,
say
as,
it might not be your vibe to do the online thing?
well, I do some solo performing, in my performing career or whatever. But I don't know, like, one, I don't think it will be my best output, and
Hmm.
so I tend to like to put myself in places to produce the best content that I think I can produce. It's partially why they make the records that I make, and why I like put the type of shows on that I put on, and how they differ, because I like to cater to the experience. And too, I don't know if I feel inspired to just play for a camera in my home studio. Um, and the tech, get, how much time or work on to get the technical aspect of that right. Two, I do solo performances, but as a drummer, like even when I've had really great successful solo concerts, I still don't enjoy them as much as working with other musicians. And and I also like, I really feed off the energy of the people who I'm performing for, and so
Right.
it's a different platform that I'm not as accustomed to. And then like in the like bigger picture, I really feel like what's happening right now and how to respond to it, uh, both personally and societally, but also in terms of artistic community, is really a marathon and not a sprint, as it seems to be. And so I'm really just taking my time to see, like, how I want to respond, and what's going to feel right without feeling like I have to figure it out right now, and really focus on the things that are important, like truly important to me, or the physical and mental well-being of me and my family, and preparing for more challenging times ahead by being healthy. I'm an asthmatic, so I'm trying to have my
Mm.
cardio up at
Hmm.
home. Um, and keeping like the just the balance of everybody being in a positive, secure feeling space here at home, so that when I do want to do whatever I'm going to do or respond how I respond, I'm doing it from a place of power, um, ultimately,
Earlier,
and
you
strength.
mentioned that you're looking forward to going back and shedding on drums. When you go into a shedding phase, what is your intention?
Well, I when it comes to the drums, I'm pretty rudimental. I like to focus on a lot of uh, rudimental things, getting my keeping my technique in check, and advancing that, which is like a ever ending journey. Um, you know, uh, Often I might prepare, I mean, for a long time lately, it's been shedding has been a focus on preparing for performance and repertoire. But or either that, or just like, checking out some different types of challenging exercises or licks, or things like that to work on uh, dexterity, or timing, or feel. Um, but my main focus is generally like more rudimentary like rudimentary technique, and and then, like, my bigger practice when it's like kind of on the drum set, off the drum set, is more just like full holistic music approach.
Right. So when you're practicing, do you think it's mostly an intellectual endeavor or emotional or both?
Both, I've all I mean, there's been so many different phases in how I might practice, to from practicing, 8 to 10 hours a day in my younger days,
Hmm.
to like hardly ever practicing in busy periods of my when I was really busy as a sideman around Chicago, playing locally, and just being extremely busy, just finding not really any time to practice, except maybe the occasional to really get prepared for a challenging gig or some new repertoire or something like that. But I've like one thing I've liked to think of practice as a time to be alone, with your instrument in an intimate way, you know,
Hmm.
and feel like one with the instrument, so that then when you go and you are performing, it's fluid, and it's just coming from just like that deep kind of relationship with your instrument, in a way where you can play what you're thinking, and you don't have to think about it,
Yeah.
and that is a more of emotional kind of place, which I think I feel like I get there when I feel, you know comfortable. I guess yeah, when I feel connected with my hands and my feet and my and I stop thinking about it, and then I get on the gig and I'm playing and it's like, wow, look at me, I can do whatever I want, you
Mm-hmm.
know, versus when it's not there and takes a little more effort, or I'm second guessing myself, or those kind of things, which are kind of emotional side of it. But then I do like try to really focus in on specific um, concepts, or a specific worksheet or something I've gotten in throughout the past, or I've got from a friend, or something I might even pulled off of the internet or whatever, and just focus on something really technical as a place of discipline or whatever. And I've gone through times where I'll break a practice session up into smaller groups of working on technical stuff, and then letting myself have creative time, and having some sort of regimen to that. But often I'll just sit down on the drums and just find what's inspiring me at the time.
You said your kids are 9 and
5.
5. Do you remember being 5?
I do.
What do you remember about that time?
Well, I mean, I one thing I remember specifically about being 5 is focused around the drums. And my father, who's a drummer, he was teaching um, at this community music school where he put together a drum ensemble with all of his students at that school, and maybe like 12 different kids, aged from like 6, 7 years old to all the way to 21, who could take over a majority of his lessons when he went on tour. You know, and he put a drum ensemble, put some like different grooves with different sections and different calls and places to solo. And I used to have to go whatever day of week it was. I used to go with him to the school, and I would have to sit around while he taught hours of lessons. And then I got to play with the ensemble. I would get a lesson too. It would be really remedial, just like 1, 2, 3, 4, playing alternating with your hands, or learning double strokes, and maybe even trying to teach a paradiddle at the time. I don't know, but I remember being part of that ensemble, as well, being the youngest member, and having like a simple part that I'd have to play on a bass drum and just be able to keep a time. And so I do remember that about being about 5 years old, 5, 6 years old. um,
And for folks that don't know, your dad is Stephen McCraven, who played with folks like Archie Shepp and Yusuf Lateef and
yeah.
made several albums as a leader as well.
Yeah.
What do you remember about how it felt when you were playing at that age?
I mean, I think it's exciting. I think I don't know if I remember specific feelings, but maybe a feeling of inclusion, in a way. Being part of a group, and feeling the excitement of the music when the energy goes. I think that's something special, and I remember that being a thing where it was cool and it was fun, and we there was a community of young kids, that came around. And so that's really kind of the thing that I can remember. I mean, it's vague, and it's colored by like the memory of the memory.
You mentioned that one of the intentions of your practice is to foster a sense of intimacy between you and the instrument. Can you remember when you first started feeling that sense of intimacy?
Wow. Well, I mean, when I really, there's a few times I mean, instances where I can remember I started to practice a lot. Um, and there are some younger times, maybe when I was 9 or 10. I can remember like jamming to like records or something, but I don't think it was really until like late, like 10th grade, ninth grade or so, maybe ninth, 10th grade, where I really got inspired to like really start to practice, and would practice for hours at a time in my bedroom. And just like the feeling of just being there, just like playing until you didn't know what went by. You know, it's like, oh man, I've been in here for 3 hours. What happened? You know, and then the next time I remember when I was in college and I was able to get a drum room at the university and just spending all day in there sometimes, missing classes and just spending all day in there, just like practicing at high high energy sometimes for a long period of time, and just maybe start working on an exercise, and then next thing you know it evolve and play next thing I've been playing straight for an hour, like not even just going in hard, and then that could goes for 2 hours or 3 hours, and you go out and have some water or whatever, and then come back in and just keep on playing until you're hungry.
Yeah. I remember
uh,
those days too.
Yeah, and you had the time, or maybe I didn't have the time because it didn't really help me, finish college necessarily. But yeah, like forgetting about everything, your responsibilities, and everything, just shedding. Um, and that being like, feeling like, whoa, what happened? And that feeling, I don't know. That's something maybe that I guess is akin to that.
Long ago the clock washed midnight away, bringing the dawn, bringing the dawn, bringing the dawn. Oh God, I must be dreaming. Time to get up again and time to start up again. Pulling on my socks now. Where did the night go? Should have been asleep when I was sitting there drinking beer and trying to start another letter to you. Don't know how many times I didn't write again last night. Should have been asleep when I turned the stack of records over and over so I wouldn't be up by myself. Where did the night go? Should go to sleep now and say, yeah, well, fuck a job with money. Because I spend it all on unlined paper and can't.
So you mentioned that, you first got really inspired to start practicing when you were about in ninth grade. Was there something like an event or something that you heard that kind of drew you into that world?
Well, junior high school, um, was playing in the concert band. I was playing, percussion and snare drum, bass drum, and that experience was just like something I didn't like a lot. There was no jazz band at the school, at the middle school, and I would play at home, but then uh, by that point, I just started being like, seeing the life, seeing my dad off on the road again, and then my parents were splitting up and da 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 da, and just being like, man, I don't want to be a professional musician, and I got really into football,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to ninth grade, and it's like beginning of high school, and I quit the concert band. I wasn't doing any sort of extracurricular music. And I remember walking by the band room, being like a freshman in high school, not knowing many people, and hearing these kids playing some music. And I popped my head in. I saw the band room for the first time after a few weeks in school. And these guys, they were just like, "Oh, hey, what's up, man? Come on, you wanna jam with us? Do you play music?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I play the drums." And then I went in there and we jammed on something, and everybody was like, "Whoa, hey man, you're really good. You should hang out with us and like join the jazz band, and there's a battle of the bands coming." And then all of a sudden, I just started playing with people in the school, and that next year, put together a little group, and we played the talent show, and we won the talent show with a really silly song that we just made up versus everybody else was doing covers. And from there on, that band like turned into a full project. We recorded a record that year. By the end of the year, we had a CD we pressed ourselves. We were selling around the school, and those kids were a couple years older than me. And that band, they went to the university in the same town that we grew up in.
Which
And then
town?
in Amherst, Massachusetts at UMass.
Mm-hmm.
And so like by my junior year of high school, then that band, we won the UMass Battle of the Bands, and we got to play the spring concert at, where the UMass plays basketball, and we opened for Rozelle and 50 Cent and Real Big Fish. And
That's quite a lineup.
yeah, a college, 2001 spring concert, UMass. But I was still in high school, and the band just ended up getting a lot of popularity in town throughout the university circuit. And by the time I was a senior in high school, we were really playing a lot all over the Northeast. And at that same time, I started playing with some local jazz groups that I got hooked up with some people through my dad's connections. And so by my senior year of high school, I was working quite a bit locally and like kind of, some weekend warrior stuff, and with a few different projects, including a band that was like a real band.
Mm-hmm.
And I was that guy in the band that also had a bunch of other gigs. And so like, as I got just busy out of necessity and out of just in being inspired to like that I could work and we were having fans and like, and I had random gigs and I could play in bars, as an 11th grader. And like, I was kind of big and looked a lot older than I was at the time anyway. And so that was all exciting and was inspiring for me to like, keep on playing. And I was inspired to like, be able to do a really good job on whatever gig I had. And just music in general was inspiring. I was checking out all sorts of stuff. We were going to see bands and, doing all sorts of stuff because I was hanging out with like my college band friends, and then these like, kind of local jazz musicians who were all 10, 15 years older than me, or most of them were, and that's also where I met, playing in that the local jazz circuit. I met a tenor player who was like one of the star players at UMass in the music department. And he was the one that kind of convinced me that when I got to UMass, if I was going to go to UMass, which, that was a big part of that decision, that I would join the music department. Because I was like, no, I'm in a band. I got gigs. I don't know if I want to go to school for music. That was really my mantra. But he just kind of was like, no, come on. And so when I entered my freshman year, I didn't join as a music major. They just said if I wanted to get a drum room and I wanted to get drum lessons from Bob Galati, who was teaching there, then I had to audition for the program. And then they put me in the big band. They put me in some combos. And then when I started to miss all my classes from practicing and skipping my regular classes, I got to put on academic suspension for a semester. And so when I came back the next year, I joined as a music major with a scholarship. So it's kind of weird, and it was not a very good road to success for the university. But at the same time, my band was working all the time. I had gigs all over the place. That was kind of my upbringing.
Yeah, it sounds like music ended up being your vehicle into the world as a person.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Earlier, you mentioned that you were originally hesitant to pursue life as a musician because you saw your parents' musical lifestyle as somehow correlated to their divorce.
Yeah, I think some of the lifestyle and just the travel and the whole thing was just very difficult for a family, and there's also individual decisions around all of those things, and it's just challenging. And even you could see, I felt like from a young age, and I feel fortunate to see the broad ups and downs and implications of a career in the arts and how different choices you make as an artist or creator or musician or whatever kind of art you do, have the impact on your life. And, you can also see how some people, you have really great gigs sometimes and you could be doing really well. And there's low points sometimes and you really don't know. And being an artist is not for the faint of heart,
Yeah.
And so I don't have any, never had really any real disillusions of that, because I've seen, both sides. It's like people, even like now in my career, so many times I've gotten people like, wow, man, you're really doing it. You made it or whatever. And I'm like looking at my bills and stuff,
Yeah.
and like, I took a tremendous hit in my earning ability in the early days of when my so, leader career kind of took off, and those are some of the unforeseen things that, that ups and downs that, are challenges. And so I never had real disillusionment from that because of seeing my folks, and also like that band that started in high school after we won that talent show. A lot of our first gigs that we had around the professional local scene was my mom hiring us to back her up and do her music, which was like Eastern European folk music mixed with jazz and other kind of styles. And that's where I really got all my like kind of interest and love for odd meter kind of music, is doing Eastern European, folk music, Hungarian folk dances and 7/8, Bulgarian music could be 5/8, 11/8, 9/8, and just kind of learning that from a more folk oriented and dance oriented perspective than like kind of an intellectual exercise or something that was like fusion or something that I learned as like a sweet lick or something like that. And so that was like another kind of, I had a lot of opportunities to be around different music and kind of gain some different perspective on things from having that broad kind of musical family foundation. But then from even after that, like I do feel like a lot of it, ended up feeling like, and this is what I hope for my kids, is like to leave the stuff in front of them and give them opportunities to participate, but then all in the hopes that they're inspired to like do it themselves, because that's where I really feel like all the best all the best stuff came out of.
Right. Not to be too heavily guided.
Yeah, it's like you can only lead a horse to water.
As a child of musicians who's now a parent himself, what about the way you were raised have you replicated in your parenting style, and what have you done differently?
Yeah, I think some of it's just priority, and you know some of the crazy travel decisions I've made in the last few years, being on the road for like a month and having 3 days off in Europe and saying, I'm gonna come back to Chicago and spend a day and a half at home and spend the rest of that time flying to get back on the road and spend a hefty amount of money to make that happen. Um, And so I've made a number of decisions like that. Um, Bringing my family out on the road as much as I can, which is also expensive. And having to consider, sometimes what gigs I can and can't do. And, quite frankly, I feel like when I had kids, it made me, everybody's worried about, their career and how are they going to do it and how they're going to afford it and will they be able to do both. And that's legitimate. That's legitimate. But felt like I became such a better person and musician and business person um, after having kids, because everything got that much more serious, and all my choices became, you know, you know, I'm gonna take less BS, from people. I have a clear structure of what gigs and why what I do is important, and how to value that and how to value my time. And so I've really tried to take it as like incorporating my family into it as a motivator and a way to help me grow and be just a more efficient and productive and meaningful artist.
What was the impetus to start creating work as a band leader?
So I've always had that desire. I mean, part of it, both of my parents have their own records out that are pretty kind of creative type projects and left of center in a lot of ways. Um, kind of broadly interpreting genre or breaking out of genre. And so they're like really my first real inspirations to be a leader. From the beginning of playing the instrument, being a leader was part of that. Wanting to have my own record was part of that. Starting a band, with my friends in high school was me wanting to be having my own artistic output that I was a part of, as a creator. And so that's always been part of my goals as a musician. And, throughout all of my 20s moving to Chicago, I was a part of a lot of creative collaborations, that maybe weren't me as a leader, but were collaborative projects, as well as really having a robust career as doing sideman work across the board, from jobbing or general business to the jazz circuit to world music circuit to playing with hip hop artists and starting to work with DJs and all sorts of different things like that. But always throughout all gigs I've ever done, my priority has always been on creative projects that I am directly a part of, and that if I'm going to work with your project, that I'm going to do it from my vantage point as my own artist, but I'll always be flexible to do whatever is necessary to make the music right and be selfless in that, even coming from my own sound and perspective, those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
And so that's been at the core of my approach. And I had been trying to make my own record, all through my 20s, and I feel like, I had done sessions and this and that, and it just never fully had come together. And I just kept on going until the right opportunity came to do the first proper release with a label, Split Decision, with Chicago Sessions here. And that was kind of like a happenstance type of project that came up while I was working on a record I'd been working on for like 3-4 years before that. And then I had an opportunity to do this kind of a little bit more straight ahead record than I was intending to do. And I took the opportunity. And that just kind of helped really kind of kickstart getting more leader gigs around Chicago, because I've been getting some leader gigs around Chicago from the time I moved to town, or at least after the first maybe 1 or 2 years I lived here. And but then maybe it was like 8 years later before I had my own record out. And then from there, it's just like incrementally having different opportunities and then getting hooked up with the situation that we made In the Moment with, and it just kind of took off from there. But one thing about In the Moment was that even that was I've been not only have been working on trying to make my own record, and producing other people's records all through this, and like kind of starting my home studio. I would come home from a day of 2 or 3 gigs, brunch gig, like eat like 8 o'clock jazz gig at a club, late night thing with a DJ, and come home and come down to the basement and open up my computer or my like sampler or whatever, and like try to make beats, because I was interested in doing electronic music, and I never really had an outlet for that, didn't know what to do. And like I was working on music or creative recording techniques, and or doing like demo sessions on my like recording setup. I was doing a lot of creative mixing for years, and I feel like it wasn't really until like I felt comfortable kind of presenting that work to the world, the stuff I did in my bedroom and not the stuff that I had to do, when I really kind of opened up that side of my creativeness to the world, creativity. That's like when I think things really kind of changed for me as a leader, And so I always encourage people to, like, whatever you do, on your own when nobody's looking, like if you invest yourself in that, I feel like it will do better by you.
Was it scary at first?
Yeah. There's a lot of reasons why, I was hesitant to put that out, could be like the pressures of the jazz scene. Is it jazzy? Is it jazz enough? Is it going to be considered real? Or it's like, or on the other side,
How would you
like,
answer that question?
is it hip hop? Are they going to accept it? Is there a place for this? This or that. There's all these kind of different feelings, Um,
How would you answer that question of whether something is authentic in one genre or another?
ultimately in the end, I mean, that's a large can of worms. I mean, one, at times, does it matter? You know, um, I don't know. I mean, I think, I always try to pay homage to where I come from and the music that came from me. But like for me, that's really broad. That could be broad, and I could
Right.
talk about jazz and the authentic thing of jazz is like of like I like I come from an oral tradition of jazz, and when I entered the university that was touting a different authentic jazz, that didn't really click with me.
Mm-hmm.
So then who are we talking is it has the power to claim the authenticity? I would be, in some ways I'm a traditionalist when it comes to jazz, like is it rooted in the blues? Is it swinging? You know, is it part of the oral tradition of the Great American Songbook? You know, uh, I would hear to those things in terms of like the idiom of jazz, and then so when I would get into a situation where we're playing a straight eighth music with a bunch of meter changes, and all this other stuff that I would like, but it wasn't swinging, it wasn't rooted in the blues, and yet that's going to be considered more authentic jazz than, say, the music that I'm making contemporarily that is heavily based in improvisation, might be swinging or heavily using triplets, and has a groove and has a lot of idiomatic reference to to that culture. And so who gets to claim what is that,
Right. I mean, but that's
um
something you were asking yourself, like when
I know,
considering,
and
was it?
eventually what I've come down to,
Yeah.
is kind of made, I guess, my thesis is that, you know is that when people ask me, is jazz dead, or is that jazz, or what is jazz, I'm like, it's a stupid question.
Yeah.
It's a dumb question. It's a question that doesn't have a clear answer because it's too dynamic of a field, you know.
Even the word jazz was resented by the people that created that music from
Created.
the
I
beginning.
I don't I don't particularly like the term, um, and I would err on the side of, the people who critique the term pretty harshly. Yet, you know, I don't feel like there's I feel like it's an easy way to have the discussion. You know what I mean?
Well, I like how you put it when you say that you came from an oral tradition, and then when you went to school, it didn't feel like you were engaging in that same oral tradition.
No, I was like an anomaly there.
Well, I would posit that the way that music is presented or art is presented in an academic setting is analogous to a written tradition in the sense that an oral tradition is constantly evolving and a written tradition is static,
Yeah,
which is kind of counter to the spirit of that music.
yeah, yeah. It's like more like a game of telephone.
Right, exactly. And that's how oral languages work. The way that we're speaking to each other right now is different than the way that we would be speaking to each other 50 years ago. We would have different colloquialisms and different inflection.
Yeah, and so for that, like, I'm more interested in like what my heroes in this music thought rather than exactly what they played.
Right.
Why they played what they played. What were their ideas? you know, like I'm interested in, you know, searching for mastery on my instrument and in my craft, and engaging with the music of the day around me, and what's happening in the world contemporarily. They said, if it, the cats, they wanted to be hip. They were taking part in popular culture. The music was made by young people. It was subversive in many
Correct.
ways.
Yes.
These things these things are really inspirational to me, with the quest of mastery on my instrument, and searching out all music that inspires me and incorporating that into my study of mastery.
So it's interesting that you were asking yourself if what you were doing was authentic to this larger culture at first.
Well, I don't know if I was asking myself it was about if it was authentic to the culture. I don't think I've ever felt that. It was more like, I'm asking myself, is this authentic in the industry? Is there a road for me to have a career as a musician? you know?
Is it productive to even ask that question?
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's. I don't know. I think. I mean, I don't mind pontificating on the industry and things. I do find conversations around these ideas interesting. Um, but I do think a lot of musicians, they get too caught up. They get too caught up in that, and they lose sight of you know they lose sight of just like the broader picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy thing to obsess about, right? Because money is quantifiable. Spotify listeners are quantifiable. And so you can, if you're the kind of person that is worried about, putting your art into the world, you can obsess about those numbers rather than just making yourself vulnerable and putting it out there.
Yeah, I think vulnerability is attractive in music, in art,
Yeah,
like
it's
honesty.
probably necessary if you're going to make an authentic statement to yourself.
And that was the thing that I wanted to that I what I was kind of getting at there, is that moment to show your authentic self. I think is powerful. Um, it's a powerful statement, and I think people can relate with that, and feel that, you know. And I think it's hard to do that too, because you gotta have to do that in a way that, if it's not well received or whatever, you can't let that stop you or slow you down, because it's not a all or nothing game. It's a cumulative game,
Right.
long term process in as a career, and as a person putting your statement out there, and the people who I see who are able to maintain are doing it again, and then answering that one with another one, and answering with another one, and keeping it alive and keeping it going, because they're inspired to create, and they're going to, regardless of the circumstance, like, keep on trudging. I like to work with the people that I have long-term relationships with, first and foremost. I like to work with people that I know, and that I've come up with, and so, like, I do what I can to work with the people in my circle, first and foremost. But, like, I would say, last year, out of all the gigs I did last year, was a lot. I probably only did like 10 sideman gigs, and that was really cool in the way that I'm proud of where I got, and that my ability to be able to do that. But I do miss, like, some of the challenges and just playing other people's music and not always being in charge and not always, being like, hey guys, what do you want to play? And everybody's looking at me like, hey, whatever you want, boss. And so, I like to do it, but at the same time, I've had to make like look at things realistically in terms of my career and my family, and make sure that, like, I come home when I have to come home. I don't burn myself out, and and yeah, like I have enough time to like make sure that I'm dedicating everything I can to the opportunities that are kind of growing my career in the long term. And so, yeah, sometimes there's some tough decisions there to make, you know, but yeah, a lot of it matters. How much time is it going to take, and even things like how much money it's going to cost have like kind of, I mean, pay me, have kind of like less implication actually to the decision as it would have in the past, you know? Because it's now I'm making other decisions, not just about like what's the dollar amount that I may make, but like, how does this work with the relationships, that I have with the musicians, or with kind of fans and everything, and make my decisions with how the broader implications kind of work for me in the long term in terms of my relationships and my productivity and my ability to maintain kind of my sanity throughout all of this.
What do you think about the most throughout the day?
So that's a big question. Oh man, I don't know. I feel like I've what you know till this moment, which is a unique moment. I felt like the last couple of years I've been so busy, um, that all I think about is my work. If I'm not like dealing directly with my family and personal situations, um, I spend a lot of time like working on music and deadlines. I've maintained a pretty productive release schedule in the last few years. So there's always looming deadlines, looming large concerts to prepare for, to arrange for, lots of conversations with management and agents and label representatives and promoters and a variety of people that it takes for me to kind of manage all the different people in my team. And, I've felt like I haven't had much time for just just pondering, between being a parent and a full-time musician and working on my business and all of this stuff. So yeah, I don't know,
Do you worry about anything? I mean, this
everything.
current situation aside?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, worry about all of it.
You mentioned that you have lots of looming deadlines. Do you find that having deadlines makes you more productive?
Absolutely. Um, I don't know I would know if I could have made all the records I've made in the last few years without some strong deadlines that were strong yet flexible yet strong. But yeah, deadlines are very helpful for me, because I tend to go back to the work over and over and over and continue to like evolve it and edit it and work on it and change things and do different versions and so on. I feel like the deadlines give me something real strong places to like make some concrete decisions, um, and keep it moving. I mean, I've kind of like to overlook. I mean, I'm reassessing all sorts of things, but like I've like to overload myself with stuff happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then just like you know just start powering through it, at the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, I'm similar to that, where if I don't have a deadline, I won't get it finished. Sometimes I won't even start, you know.
Yeah,
But if I put that structure in place, then I know it has to be done by a certain day, and I don't even necessarily know how it happens sometimes, you know.
yeah. I mean, finishing the Gil Scott Heron reimagining became really tight project to kind of fit in to my schedule, and it was um yeah, without the deadline, I don't know what it would have happened, but it definitely was quite stressful on that one.
So tell me about that project, which came out earlier this year. It's an album called Renew Again, and it's you and Gil Scott Heron. It's a reimagining of his work. What was the impetus to make it, and what was it about his work in particular that spoke to you to the degree that you would want to make this record?
Well, the good people at XL Recordings reached out to me because both Ben Beardsworth, one of the CEOs, and Richard Russell, founder and producer of the original Guild record, they reached out to me and asked if I would be interested because they had found my music or found me in different ways. They said those two guys that said they found me separately and then had a conversation, and they thought I'd be good for this, and this was a project they wanted to do. And at first I was kind of taken aback that I was getting called for the opportunity, and I gave it some thought, and I accepted, the project, and then kind of had a number of conversations, or very actually few conversations with them and Richard Russell, particularly on the creative side, about him, how he worked with Gil, what it was like making the record, and different concepts around it. And in the end, they were very much like they just gave me kind of a very wide open slate to do my thing. And that was kind of how it came about. And then, in a way, the open slate felt too open, and kind of,
Yeah.
I threw some ideas at them like, well, I could do something like this or do something like this. What do you want to help point me in a direction? And they're like, oh, that sounds great. Whatever you want to do.
Did you find it creatively helpful to self-impose limitations?
Yeah. Well, the conversation, I pulled some things from a conversation with with Richard, and then I did some additional research on Gil. That was like informative, but didn't really give me that much more than I was already familiar with, kind of knowing his work a little bit. And then had some conversations with artists that I wanted to incorporate, that I knew I wanted to incorporate on the record from the get-go, which were like Jeff Parker and Ben Lamar Gay. I kind of just had consulted them a little bit and told them like this was happening and that I wanted them to be involved if possible. And a few things that stuck with me is like, I really, this record being about a lot about Gil coming his whole life and coming back around. I like the fact he called himself a bluesologist. We think of him often as the godfather of hip hop or this or that, but he would call himself a bluesologist in a couple of interviews, and his music was so rooted in the blues. So like that kind of connected me to this, some blues, down home blues elements, and the conversation with Richard, just kind of talking about family and ancestry and the jazz movement from kind of that period of Gil's life, kind of brought me into like wanting to incorporate some samples from my dad's records and kind of bringing some personal tone from my own life in there as well. And so from there, we just kind of started booking a couple sessions and working on some tracks and kind of working with the lyrics. and it slowly started to come together, and some piece by piece.
Tell me about the record you're working on right now.
Well, I'm working on a record entitled "In These Times," which, maybe the title is becoming even more apropos. And it features a variety of compositions I've been working on for almost the last 10 years, from the past till some more contemporary compositions, mostly dealing with a variety of different time fields, time signatures, polyrhythms, as well as audio content from In These Times, which is a political newspaper and radio program, where I've got some interviews from Studs Terkel's interviews on that program from 60s and 70s, that are incorporated, kind of dealing with different issues at hand, and that's kind of the gist of the record. And we've been performing some of the music, around, and recording it live as well as in the studio, in the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis, as well as Symphony Center here in Chicago, as well as some recording we did at the In These Times office, and some studio sessions, both in studios around Chicago and in my home studio here. And so I've got a variety of different kind of source material, and I'm putting the whole thing into one kind of large project.
And that's the one that's the deadline got pushed back a little bit because of the pandemic.
Yeah, that we're kind of reviewing that, and it's kind of, part of me is just like in my personal space, like taking the opportunity to kind of give myself a second and kind of reassess. But I've been working on this record for a while, and a lot of the pieces are pretty much in place, and so now just kind of like living in the moment,
I love it, and thank you for spending this time with me. Makaya McCraven, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.